Welcome, wanderers of the shadowed vale, to Throne of Nightmares. I am your host, the keeper of forgotten curses, the whisperer in the walls. Tonight, we do not chase ghosts through sunlit corridors or laugh at old wives' tales by the fireside. No, tonight, we descend into the marrow of a legacy that pulses with the black blood of fate itself. We gather around this invisible hearth, where the flames flicker not with warmth, but with the cold gleam of ancestral eyes watching from the abyss. Imagine, if you dare, a place where the wind does not merely blow, it remembers. It carries the sighs of the damned, the rustle of silk gowns long rotted to dust, the faint, metallic tang of blood spilled under a sky that wept no tears. This is Ravenshire Manor, perched like a raven's claw on the jagged cliffs of the Yorkshire moors. Its towers claw at the heavens, as if pleading or accusing. For centuries, it has stood sentinel over secrets that should have crumbled with the earth that birthed them. But secrets, my friends, are stubborn things. They burrow deep. They twist through veins like roots of some infernal tree, and they bloom in the unlikeliest of soils, the blood of the innocent. Close your eyes now. Let the chill seep in. Feel the damp stone beneath your fingers, slick with the perpetual mist that rolls in from the North Sea like a shroud drawn over the living. Hear the gravel crunch under boots that are not your own, boots from another time, treading paths worn by feet that drag chains of their own making. Smell the brine and the decay, the faint rot of ivy choking the walls, as if the house itself is slowly suffocating under the weight of its sins. This is no mere house, oh no. Ravenshire is a tomb, a living sepulchre where the dead refuse to lie quiet, and the living, well, the living learn quickly that some inheritances are not gold or land, but a noose woven from the threads of destiny. Our tale tonight is one of such a noose, the dark legacy of the Ravenshire family, a bloodline cursed by fate. It begins, as all true horrors do, not with a scream, but with a whisper. A promise made in the dead of night, under a moon that hung low and bloated, like the eye of some ancient god roused from slumber. The Ravenshires were not always marked by shadow. Once they were lords of the land, their names synonymous with woolen mills that spun prosperity from the hardy sheep of the moors, their halls echoing with the laughter of hunts and the clink of silver goblets. But prosperity, like mist, is fleeting, and when it lifts, what lurks beneath? Picture Eleanor Ravenshire, the first to feel the chill of the curse's breath on her neck. It was the year 1643, in the shadow of England's civil wars, when brother turned blade against brother, and the air was thick with the smoke of burning thatch and the cries of the accused. Eleanor was no witch, though the villagers would later whisper otherwise, but a woman of sharp mind and sharper ambition. Wife to the stern Lord Harlan Ravenshire, she tended the manor's vast herb gardens, her hands stained green with secrets of healing and harm. It was there, amid the nightshade and henbane, that she first heard the voice. Not in her ears, mind you, but in the hollows of her chest, where the heart stutters before it beats. The blood calls, it said. Spill it, and claim what is yours. And spill it she did, not with malice, but with the desperation of a woman whose husband gambled away their fortunes on dice carved from the bones of saints. One autumn eve, as leaves bled crimson onto the earth, Eleanor slipped a draught into Harlan's wine. His death was swift, a foam at the lips, a rattle like autumn's last breath. The manor passed to her unchallenged, for who suspects the grieving widow with tear-streaked cheeks? But as she stood over his grave, the wind shifted. It carried not solace, but a laughter, low, guttural, like stones grinding in the earth's belly. And in that moment, the curse took root. From that night forward, the Ravenshires would know no peace. Children born with eyes like polished obsidian, staring too long into corners where shadows lingered. Dreams that blood into waking, visions of cloaked figures circling the cradle, murmuring incantations in a tongue older than stone. And always, the ravens, those black harbingers that nested in the eaves, their cries a chorus of judgment. One by one, the hares would falter, a son lost to the cliffs in a storm that came from a clear sky, a daughter wed to a man whose heart stopped on their wedding night, his lips blue as if kissed by frost in July. The family dwindled not to extinction, but to a brittle thread, frayed and waiting to snap. Yet what grips us now, what pulls you deeper into this velvet darkness, is not merely the litany of loss. No, it's the why. Why does fate, that capricious spinner, single out one bloodline for such exquisite torment? Was it Eleanor's sin, a debt unpaid to forces beyond the veil, or something older, woven into the very soil of Ravenshire? Legends speak of a barrow mound beneath the manor, a portal where the old god slumbered, disturbed by the first Ravenshire's plough. Others murmur of a pact, sealed in the blood of twins sacrificed to ensure the land's fertility. A ritual borrowed from the Druids, twisted by Christian fear into devilry. As we embark on this journey, dear listener, prepare your soul. For the Ravenshire's curse is no distant fable, it is a mirror. It reflects our own fragile threads of fate, the sins we bury in garden soil, hoping the roots will not find their way back to the surface. Tonight, we unearth them. We walk the halls where portraits weep black tears, where the grandfather clock chimes not hours, but heartbeats. Yours and mine, growing ever slower. Stay with me, let the shadows lengthen. For in the throne of nightmares we are all Ravenshires, waiting for the noose to tighten. A pause. Thunder rumbles. Screen fades to a sepia-toned map of the Yorkshire moors, raven feathers drifting across it like omens. And so we begin at the Genesis, in the year of our Lord 1427. When the Wars of the Roses painted England in the colours of betrayal, there rose a man named Aldrich Ravenshire. A yeoman of modest means, he claimed the moors by right of conquest, not with sword, but with seed. His fields bloomed where others withered. His sheep fattened on grasses that should have poisoned them. Whispers followed him to market. Sorcery, they said, a deal with the devil's own flock. But Aldrich laughed, his voice booming like thunder over the dales. He built his manor not as a fortress, but as a temple to his cunning. A sprawling edifice of grey stone hauled from the quarries of Whitby, where the waves crash eternal hymns to the sea's hunger. Ravenshire Manor took shape under a sky perpetually bruised, its foundations laid on what locals called the Raven's Fell, a tract of land scarred by ancient barrows, where the earth seemed to breathe in sighs of forgotten kings. Aldrich's wife, Isolde, a woman of Celtic blood with hair like spun midnight, oversaw the gardens. She planted not just herbs, but wards rows of yew trees to bind the dead, circles of salt beneath the thresholds to repel the unquiet. Yet even she could not ward against what stirred below. On the night of the manor's completion, as torches guttered in the great hall and all flowed like rivers of forgetfulness, a storm broke. Not rain, but hail, sharp as arrowheads, drumming the roof like the fingers of the impatient. And from the fell the ravens came, hundreds, wings blotting the moon, circling the chimneys in a vortex of feathers and fury. Aldrich, emboldened by drink, stepped into the gale. Begone, foul birds! He roared, flinging salt from a silver shaker. But the flock descended not to peck, but to watch. Their eyes, oh, those eyes, gleamed with intelligence unholy, reflecting not the storm, but Aldrich's own face, twisted in miniature mockery. When dawn crept in, pale and shivering, the birds were gone. But Isolde found the mark a single feather, black as sin, embedded in the hearthstone like a dagger, and with it the first whisper. The land remembers. It breathed, though no lips moved. What you take, you give in kind. Their first child, born 9 moons later, was a boy named Harlan, fair of hair, but with eyes that held the fell's shadow. He grew strong, heir to the burgeoning estate, but plagued by dreams of tunnels beneath the manor, where pale figures shuffled in chains, their mouths sewn with raven quills. Aldrich dismissed it as fever, but Isolde knew better. She consulted the crones of the dales, women whose faces were maps of wrinkles etched by wind and woe. The barrow kings stir, they croaked. Your husband's plough woke them, and now they hunger for tribute. To appease, Isolde offered a yew at the fell's edge, its throat slit under the new moon, blood soaking the turf until it ran black. The dreams ceased. Harlan thrived. The Ravenshires prospered. But prosperity is the siren's song. luring the unwary to jagged rocks. As the decades turned, the family expanded, daughters wed to minor lords, sons sent to court with coffers heavy with wool and ambition. The manor grew, annexes sprouting like tumors, a library lined with tomes bound in calfskin that smelled faintly of char, a chapel where the stained glass depicted not saints, but ravens bearing crowns of thorns. Yet the feather remained, a talisman on the mantel, dusted but never discarded, and the whispers that they evolved. No longer content with dreams, they slithered into waking hours. A rustle in the rafters during supper, the scratch of claws on window panes at midnight, the sudden silence of birdsong when a Ravenshire crossed the threshold of the fell. By 1587, the bloodline had thickened with the scent of Tudor intrigue. Queen Elizabeth's spies roamed the countryside, sniffing for Catholic plots amid the Protestant winds. Harlan's grandson, Edmund Ravenshire, a man of velvet doublets and silvered tongue, hosted masques in the great hall that drew courtiers from York. But Edmund harbored a secret, a hidden priest's hole beneath the library, where Father Lucius, a Jesuit exile, murmured masses in Latin shadowed by raven silhouettes on the walls. One such night, as fiddles wailed and masks concealed leers, the storm returned. Hail pelted the leaded panes, and the ravens, those eternal sentinels, massed again, their cries drowning the revelry. Panic rippled through the guests like poison in wine. Edmund, face ashen beneath his feathered caprice, retreated to the chapel. There, before the raven-crowned altar, he vowed restitution, whatever the old ones demand. He whispered, clutching the feather, now frayed at the edges like a wound that refuses to heal. Father Lucius, eyes wide with forbidden knowledge, spoke of the barrows. They are not kings, my lord, but watchers. City of the under-earth, bound by Christian iron until your line disturbed the peace. Blood for soil, they crave. Twin blood, purest offering. Edmund paled. His wife, Beatrice, was heavy with child. Twins, the midwife saw. The birth came in the witching hour, thunder cracking the sky like God's own lash. The boy, Theodore, emerged first, bawling lustily. But the girl, oh, the girl, Eloan arrived silent, her tiny fists clenched as if grasping secrets too vast for her form. Beatrice, sweat, slick and delirious, named her after the Celtic spirits, hoping to bind her to the light. But the whispers knew better. That dawn, as the household slumbered, Eloan vanished from her cradle. No cry, no trace, only a single black feather on the pillow and a faint scent of earth, like a grave freshly turned. The barrows claimed their due. Theodore grew, but marked a birthmark like a raven's wing across his shoulder, and eyes that saw too much. The flicker of shadows where none should be, the glint of eyes in the tree line. The curse, once a murmur, now growled. Guests at Ravenshire spoke of chills that gripped the spine unbidden, of portraits whose subjects seemed to shift when unobserved, of goblets refilling with wine that tasted of copper. Edmund walled up the priest's hole, burned Father Lucius's missiles, but the damage festered. Theodore wed young, siring Harlan too, who inherited not just the manor, but the dreams. Vivid tablelocks of his aunt's tiny form, dragged into the earth by pale hands, her silence a scream echoing through stone. As the 17th century dawned, with its Puritan fires and witch hunts, the Ravenshires turned inward. Harlan, too, a scholar of occult tombs, smuggled from the continent, delved into the feather's mystery. In his journal, leather-bound, pages yellowed like old bones. He chronicled the signs, livestock birthing too, headed lambs, wells running dry then bubbling with brackish water that burned the tongue, and always the ravens, nesting in the yew grove, their eggs hatching fledglings with beaks curved like scythes. The pact is unbroken, he wrote, quill trembling. Aldrich took the fell's fertility, we repay in our own. Desperate, he sought the crone's descendants, offering gold for law. They came under cover of fog, faces veiled, chanting in tongues that made the air hum. Their right was held at the barrow's crown, under a moon veiled in gauze. Harlan, too, offered a lock of his hair, bound with Eloan's imagined ribbon, silk the color of innocence lost. The women circled, drums throbbing like buried hearts, and the earth opened. Not a chasm, but a sigh, a soft exhalation of soil, releasing a draught that smelled of milk and decay. From it rose a figure, not the child, but a shade translucent as mist, with eyes like polished jet. The debt compounds, it intuned, voice a chorus of rustling wings. One for the plough, two for the seed, thrice for the blood that denies. Harlan too is staggered back, the feather in his hand now warm, pulsing like a second heart. He returned changed, his once vibrant eyes dulled to slate. Beatrice, Eloin's mother, now grey and gaunt, found him in the library poring over maps of the moors, marking sites of ancient rings. "Must flee," she begged, but he only smiled, a rictus of feathers at the edges. "Fate is the moor, my love." Vast, unyielding. To flee is to sink deeper. Their end came swiftly, a fire in the night, blamed on a toppled candle. But witnesses swore the flames danced in raven shapes, cackling as they devoured. Theodore escaped with young Harlan, the boy clutched to his chest, suit streaked and silent. The manor stood, blackened but unbowed, its stones absorbing the screams like ink on parchment. And so the thread persisted, frayed but unbroken. Harlan, raised in the shadow of loss, vowed to break the cycle. He razed the yew grove, salted the fell, even dynamited a barrow in a fit of modern rage. But the curse laughed. Ravens returned bolder, perching on his shoulder as he signed ledgers, whispering stock tips that led to ruinous gambles. His wife, Eleanor, the ambitious widow of our opening whisper, watched him unravel, her gardens becoming her sanctuary, her poisons her solace. When Harlan gambled the last of their wool mills, desperation bloomed in her like nightshade. The draught was mercy, she told herself, but as his body cooled, the feather, passed down, enshrined in glass, cracked its case, and the voice returned, the blood calls. Spill it and claim. Eleanor claimed the manor, but the curse claimed her soul. Dreams plagued her, Eloin grown to spectral beauty. Beckoning from the barrows, her dress woven of feathers, her smile a slash of night. Guests dwindled, the hall echoed empty. Whispers from York spoke of Ravenshire as haunted ground, where the wind carried pleas in a child's voice. Eleanor, isolated, turned to the occult volumes Harlan had hoarded. In one, the compendium of barrow lore, she found the truth: the watchers were not side, nor devils, but echoes, remnants of a people buried in the fell, their rites interrupted by Romans, then Saxons, then Normans. Aldrich's plough had not just tilled soil, it had desecrated a temple, and the blood debt was eternal, demanding a Ravenshire soul with each generation's dawn. Her end was the curse's poetry. Alone in the chapel, she slit her wrists over the altar, hoping to drown the shade in her own offering. But the blood did not pool, it sank through cracks in the stone, feeding the roots below. The ravens feasted on her eyes, or so the servants saw, finding the orbs pecked clean come morning. The manor passed to a distant cousin, Percival, who dismissed it all as hysteria. But Percival's reign was brief. His children, twins again, boy and girl, vanished one equinox, lured by giggles from the fell. Searchers found only feathers and tiny handprints in the mud, pointing downward. Percival Ravenshire arrived at the manor in the spring of 1702, his carriage wheels churning mud from roads still scarred by the glorious Revolution's ghosts. A merchant of London cloth, he saw Ravenshire not as a curse, but a canvas primacrege for sheep pastures, crumbling stone for a gentleman's folly. His wife, Lydia, a porcelain beauty with ringlets of gold, clutched their twins, Jasper and Juniper, as if the very air conspired against them. "It's just fog and folklore," Percival boomed, slapping the butler's back with forced joviality. But Lydia's eyes, sharp as shears, caught the feather on the mantel, now mounted in ebony, its barbs gleaming like accusations. The first weeks were a masquerade of normalcy. Servants scrubbed the soot from Eleanor's fire, airing chambers thick with mildew's sour breath. Percival rode the moors, tallying fences, his laughter scattering gulls that wheeled like accusations. Lydia explored the gardens, overgrown tangles of rose and thorn, where Eleanor's nightshade still bloomed defiant, petals nodding like conspirators. The twins toddled under nursemaid's watch, their chubby fingers grasping at shadows that seemed to retreat just beyond reach. Jasper, the bold one, chased butterflies that dissolved into motes of black dust. Juniper, quieter, collected feathers, dozens, tucked into her pinafore like treasures from a midnight hoard. But the manor knew. Its walls, veined with cracks like lightning scars, wept condensation that formed patterns, tiny faces, mouths agape in silent pleas. At night, the grandfather clock in the hall struck not 12, but 13, a toll that vibrated through floorboards, stirring dust into spirals that whispered names long forgotten. Percival dismissed the chimes as a faulty mechanism, but sleep eluded him. Dreams came unbidden, the barrows yawning wide, Eloan at the lip, her arms outstretched, beckoning with fingers tipped in quills. "Join us, cousin," she cooed, her voice a rustle of dry leaves. "The earth is warm, the dark eternal." Lydia fared worse. Her baths turned icy mid-steam, the water clouding with silt that swirled into shapes. A woman's form, wrists dripping crimson. She took to locking the nursery door, but the twins' laughter echoed from empty corners, high and tinkling, as if played on crystal flutes. One dawn, she found Juniper in the yew grove, though the trees had been felled years prior, perched on a stump, humming a lullaby in a tongue Lydia could not place. "The watchers sing, Mama," the girl said, her eyes reflecting not the sun, but a cavernous void. Jasper, meanwhile, drew on the nursery walls with charcoal tunnels burrowing deep, pale figures marching in pairs, their heads crowned with feathers. Percival, ever the rationalist, summoned a clockmaker from York. The man arrived under drizzling skies, his tools clinking like chains. He tinkered through the afternoon, muttering of bent gears and seized mainsprings. 13 o'clock, you say? Impossible, sir. Clocks bow to time, not mock it. But as dusk fell, the mechanism whirred to life. The chimes rang, once, twice, and on the 13th, the air thickened. The clockmaker gasped, clutching his chest, his face contorting as if invisible hands squeezed. He collapsed, foam flecking his lips, the scent of bitter almonds hanging heavy. "Poison," the coroner declared. From what source? None could say, but in his pocket, clutched tight, was a single raven feather. Word spread like bracken fire. Neighbors shunned the manor, their invitations turning to curses muttered over all. Percival, fortune sinking with his reputation, doubled down, hiring masons to seal the chapel, where Eleanor's bloodstains lingered like rust on the altar. He burned the library's occult tomes, their pages curling in the hearth with a sizzle like frying fat, releasing acrid smoke that stung the eyes and birthed hallucinations, fleeting glimpses of barrow shades, their translucent forms gliding through the smoke, fingers trailing dew like tears. Lydia, unraveling, confided in a diary bound in dove, grey leather, "The house breathes with us. When Jasper sleeps, I hear his dreams, scraping, like roots seeking light through coffin lids. Juniper weeps in her slumber, but her tears are black, staining the pillow like ink from a demon's quill." The equinox approached, that hinge of seasons when the veil thins to gossamer. Percival planned a harvest feast, desperate to reclaim the manor's luster. Tables groaning under roast pheasant and plum puddings, fiddlers from the village to drown the whispers. Guests arrived warily, their coaches crunching gravel under a sky the color of bruised plums. Lydia, gowned in emerald silk that clung like a second skin, played hostess with smiles that did not reach her eyes. The twins, dressed as little lords and ladies, darted among skirts, their laughter a counterpoint to the wind's moan. But as twilight bled into night, the ravens gathered. First one, then a dozen perching on the gables, their silhouettes stark against the rising moon. The feast commenced in the great hall, candles guttering in draughts that bore no source. Stories flowed with the wine, tales of highwaymen on the moors, of smugglers' coves where the sea swallowed secrets. But Percival's jests fell flat, the air growing leaden, as if the room pressed down with unseen weight. Juniper, seated on Lydia's lap, suddenly stiffened. "They're here," she whispered, pointing to the hearth. All eyes turned. In the flames, shapes danced, not the crackle of logs, but figures of ploughmen tilling barrow soil, twins tumbling into earth, a widow's wrists blooming red. A scream shattered the illusion. Lydia's, raw and primal, she slumped, wineglass shattering, her body convulsing as if lightning coursed her veins. Chaos erupted. Guests fled. trampling finery in the mud, their cries mingling with thunder's growl. Percival carried Lydia to bed, her skin fever hot, babbling of feathers in her throat. The twins vanished in the tumult, slipped away or taken. Servants searched till dawn, lanterns bobbing like willow, the wisps, but found only the yew grove's phantom stumps, now ringed with fresh dug soil, tiny handprints radiating outward like a child's star chart. Jasper and Juniper were gone, swallowed by the fell, their absence a wound that suppurated silence. Lydia never recovered. She wandered the halls in her shift, hair unbound like a mad Ophelia, murmuring to shadows. "Give them back," she'd plead, pressing her ear to floorboards that seemed to pulse with subterranean heartbeats. Percival, hollowed, sold off parcels of land to creditors, but the manor clung, its mortgage a chain forged in the barrows. One winter night, as snow blanketed the moors in virgin white, white that hid bloodstains, he found Lydia in the nursery, wrists slashed with sewing shears, her blood tracing runes on the floor debt compounds. The feather beside her was pristine, as if newly fallen. Percival's end was solitude's mercy. He locked himself in the library, the last bastion, poring over salvaged pages from the burned tomes. The watchers demand balance, one read. For every taking a giving, soul for soil, blood for bloom. He penned a will, leaving the manor to a distant kin in Bristol, then swallowed laudanum from Eleanor's old vial. Dawn found him slumped over his desk, face peaceful, but his hand low. His hand gripped a feather quill like dipped in ink that was not ink. The Bristol cousin Reginald inherited a husk. He arrived in 1715, a barrister of stern aspect, with a wife named Agatha and no children to tempt fate. Superstition is the opiate of the fell, he declared, boarding up the nursery, draining the wells, even paving the yew grove with flagstones to smother memory. But the manor rebelled. Cracks spiderwebbed the new floors overnight, whispers seeping through like smoke. Agatha, childless but craving legacy, planted a new garden, roses not nightshade, their thorns blunted by care. Yet the blooms twisted petals, blackening to feather barbs, stems coiling like veins. Reginald delved into ledgers, uncovering not just debts, but patterns every generation, twins or hairs vanishing on equinoxes, fortunes blooming then withering like night blooming Sirius. He consulted antiquarians in London, men of wicked pomposity who scoffed at curses but paled at the feather's touch. Warm, they said, like flesh. One, Dr. Lias Crowe, a fellow of the Royal Society, proposed excavation. Science shall unmask the barrow's folly. Under summer sun, they dug at the fell's heart, spades biting turf that blood ochre. They unearthed bones, small, fragile, arranged in ritual circles, a child's ribcage cradling a raven's skull, femurs crossed like wards. Deeper, a chamber walls etched with spirals, feathers embedded in mortar like offerings. And at the center, a stone slab incised with runes that hummed when touched. Dr. Crowe traced them. This is Brythonic, pre-Roman, a birthing rite inverted, fertility stolen, demanding return. Reginald, sweat beaded, felt the ground tremble, a low rumble, as if the earth cleared its throat. The workers fled, babbling of eyes in the soil, glowing like embers. That night, the dig collapsed, burying tools and tents, but not before a final find, a locket, silver, containing twin locks of hair, Jasper and Juniper's, braided with black thread. Agatha, enthralled, wore it, claiming it warded the curse, but dreams assailed her, the twins, grown to ethereal youths, dancing in barrow light, their feet leaving no print but feathers. Reginald argued, his voice cracking like dry twigs. We end this. Sell the manor, burn the fell. But Agatha clung, her belly swelling unexpectedly. A miracle, the village midwife crowed. Twins again. Reginald's joy soared to dread. He hired guards, warded doors with iron. Christian defense against pagan shade. The birth came early, under harvest moon. The boy Oliver cried lustily. The girl, Isolde, named for the first wife, emerged silent, her skin pale as barrow clay. Agatha, enfeebled, pressed the locket to her chest. They protect, she gasped. But as midnight told 13, the nursery filled with wings whisper. Guards heard nothing, saw nothing. Only, come dawn, the cradle empty, the locket open on the floor, hair gone, replaced by a single feather. Agatha raved, accusing Reginald of jealousy, her accusations devolving to sobs that echoed the wind's wail. Reginald broken attempted flight. He packed crates under cover of fog, but the manor held. Doors jammed, horses shied from the gate, neighing as if goaded by ghosts. In desperation, he set fire to the library, hoping to purge the law. Flames roared, devouring vellum and oak, but the feather on the mantel remained untouched, floating mid-air as heat warped the air around it. Agatha perished in the blaze, her nightgown a shroud of char, clutching Isolde's imagined blanket. Oliver, the survivor, was bundled to relatives, the manor left to smoulder. Yet it endured, stones cooling to witness another chapter. Oliver returned in 1750, a naval officer scarred by wars with France, his uniform stiff with salt and resolve. Childless, he sought to redeem the name, turning the estate to agriculture, importing seeds from the colonies, vowing no more blood. But the soil rebelled, crops twisted, cornstalks bearing ears like screaming faces, potatoes unearthed riddled with quill-like roots. Ravens plagued the fields, pecking seeds to barrenness, their cries a mockery of cannon fire. Oliver's nights were vigils in the chapel, now a shell of blackened pews. He prayed not to God, but to the watchers, offering coin, then blood, his own, pricked from finger to altar. "Take me," he bargained. "Spare the line." The shade appeared, Eloan evolved, her form layered with lost twins, Juniper's braids, Jasper's dimple, Isolde's pallor. "The debt is the line," she intoned. "Each branch feeds the root." Oliver awoke sweating, the feather in his palm drawn from nowhere. His end was the moor's embrace. Riding the cliffs one gale swept eve, his horse bolted toward the edge, spooked or guided. He tumbled, body dashed on rocks below, the tide claiming his corpse like a lover's dew. The feather washed ashore miles away, clutched in his fist, delivered to the manor door by waves that lapped like tongues. The 19th century dawned on Ravenshire like a fever dream, the Industrial Revolution's iron pulse clashing with the manor's ancient rhythm. Oliver's nephew, Thaddeus Ravenshire, inherited in 1805 a factory owner from Manchester, his hands stained with machine oil rather than soil. He arrived with a retinue engineers, draftsmen, a vision to mechanize the moors. "Progress shall exorcise phantoms," he proclaimed, his voice tinny as the steam whistles he adored. His bride, Victoria, a vicar's daughter with piety as her shield, brought Bibles and bells, tolling them at dawn to shatter the night's hush. No children yet, but hope bloomed. Twins, the doctor predicted, a double blessing. Thaddeus raised outbuildings, erecting a mill powered by the beck that snaked from the fell. Waterwheels churning wool into thread, looms clacking like impatient bones. The air filled with the bleat of sheep and the hiss of steam, drowning the whispers. Or so he thought. Victoria tended the chapel, whitewashing walls to banish scorch marks, hanging crucifixes that dangled like hanged men. But the feather, relocated to a glass case in the new study, vibrated when the mill roared, its barbs quivering as if in sympathy. The twins arrived in 1807, amid the smoke of Napoleonic broadsides echoing from the continent. Edmund and Eliza, names recycled from ghosts past, were robust, their cries harmonizing like factory horns. Thaddeus celebrated with a banquet, inviting mill hands and gentry, the hall aglow with gaslight that flickered shadows into life. Toasts rang to progress, to progeny, to putting old tales to bed. But as the clock struck 13, its mechanism, fixed, but defiant, the gas jet sputtered, plunging the room into gloom. Laughter died. From the rafters, rustles descended, feathers drifting like black snow, brushing cheeks, tangling in hair. Victoria screamed first, clawing at her bodice where a feather had lodged, drawing blood. Guests trampled in panic, the banquet devolving to a rout. Thaddeus, lantern in hand, searched the twins' nursery, finding them asleep, untouched. But Eliza's blanket was askew, revealing tiny scratches on the floor, claw marks, fresh, circling the cradle like a noose. Edmund clutched a feather in his fist, cooing to it as if a doll. The mill hands whispered of sabotage, rival factories, jealous eyes, but Thaddeus knew. He boarded the nursery windows, hired night watchmen armed with pistols and prayers. The hauntings escalated, methodical as Thaddeus's ledgers. looms jammed with threads that knotted into runes, spindles spinning backward to unravel bolts into crimson skeins. Sheep birth lambs with raven beaks, their bleats cawing accusations. Victoria's piety cracked. She burned sage in the chapel, its smoke curling into shapes. Eloan's face, mouthing return. Dreams pegged Thaddeus the barrows as factories, watchers laboring at infernal machines, their pale limbs chaining souls to wheels that ground eternity to dust. He awoke gasping, the feather case shattered, the plume embedded in his palm like a stigmata. By 1815, with Waterloo's victory cheers fading, the twins turned 8. Thaddeus planned a grand tour, London's expositions to broaden their horizons beyond moors and murmurs. But the equinox loomed, a spectre on the calendar. Victoria, gaunt from sleepless vigils, sewed wards into their travelling cloaks, silver threads embroidered with psalms, pockets stuffed with salt and saints' bones. The carriage waited at dawn, horses stamping fog-shrouded gravel. Thaddeus lifted Edmund first, the boy giggling, then Eliza. But she was gone, slipped from the nursery in the night, her bed cold. Searches combed the moors, lanterns piercing mist like futile daggers. They found her shoe at the fell's edge, laces untied, beside a burrow freshly dug, feathers rimming the lip like morbid lace. Edmund, inconsolable, claimed she sang to him of warm earth and feather beds. Thaddeus, rage boiling, dynamited the barrows, blasts echoing like thunder's wrath, earth vomiting bones and stone. The watchers wailed, a keening that shattered village windows miles away. Rubble buried the sights, but the curse burrowed deeper. The mill's wheel seized, flooding the beck with slurry that poisoned fish, their scales iridescent with oil-slick rainbows. Workers deserted, crossing themselves at the sight of Thaddeus's shadow, elongated, winged. Victoria descended into fervor, preaching sermons in the great hall to empty chairs. "The devil walks these stones," she'd cry, Bible raised like a blade. But one sermon ended in silent sea. She collapsed, throat swelling as if throttled by invisible quills, her final gasp a rattle of feathers. Autopsy revealed none, only bruises like fingerprints, pale and cold. Thaddeus buried her beside the fell, the grave collapsing overnight, soil heaped as if spurned. Edmund, now sole heir, grew withdrawn, sketching barrows in his primers, his eyes darkening to obsidian. Thaddeus threw himself into work, expanding the mill to drown grief. By 1830, Ravenshire woolworks employed hundreds, threads shipped to London tailors crafting empire's uniforms. But prosperity sorrowed bolts arrived frayed, dyed not crimson but black, patterns weaving ravens mid-flight. Customers returned them, whispering of chills when worn, of dreams where cloth tightened like shrouds. Thaddeus ignored omens, courting a second wife. Margaret, a widow of quiet steel. She bore no children, but brought stepdaughters, twins from her first marriage, Beatrice and Bronwyn, aged 10. Fate's jest was cruel. The girls adored Edmund, now 16, teaching him quadrilles in the hall. But shadows lengthened with their stay. Bronwyn found the feather case, empty, the plume vanished. Beatrice reported giggles from the walls, high and inviting. Edmund, smitten with Bronwyn, confided his legacy. "The earth hungers, sister. It took my twin, it will take more." Thaddeus forbade such talk, but the equinox circled again. This time, the vanishing was quadruple. Edmund, Beatrice, Bronwyn, and a maid lured by lantern light to the fell. Such as heard cries from the rubble-strewn barrows, muffled as if through soil. Digging yielded nothing but feathers, sodden with dew that tasted of salt tears. Margaret fled, denouncing the manor as hell's antechamber. Thaddeus, alone, confronted the shade in the chapel. Eloan manifested, augmented by lost faces. Juniper's freckles, Eliza's curls, her former mosaic of absence. "The plough took our womb," she accused, voice a gale through cracks. "Your machines grind our bones. Repay or join." Thaddeus offered the mill's deed, but she laughed, wings unfurling from her back. He awoke in his bed, unscathed, but the study burned, gas lamp overturned, ledger's ash, insurance denied, citing arson, whispers pinned it on him, grief maddened, ruined. Thaddeus auctioned the estate in 1840, fleeing to Edinburgh with a pension scraped from wool remnants. The buyer, a speculative banker named Horace Grimshaw, saw only profit, no curse, just creaky timbers. He modernized ruthlessly, gas lines snaking walls like veins, a railway spur to haul bales. His family, wife Clara, sons Henry and Hugh, not twins, praise God, arrived in 1842, optimistic, but Grimshaw was no Ravenshire. The curse, particular, bided. Clara planted victory gardens, but roses bled sap like wounds. Henry the elder heard chimes at 13, dismissing them as echoes from the tracks. Hugh, adventurous, explored the sealed nursery, prying boards to reveal walls etched with Edmund's sketches. Barrows pulsing with light. The hauntings were subtle at first day, portraits swaying in still air, their eyes tracking Hugh's steps. Clara's sewing basket overflowed with feathers, unbidden. Horace laughed it off, hosting soirees for railway magnates. The hall filled with cigar smoke and scheming murmurs. But one soiree, mid-Victorian pomp, shattered the illusion. As port circulated, the chimes told 13 and the gaslights dimmed to bioluminescent glow. From the vents, whispers emanated, names Aldrich, Isolde, Aloan, building to a cacophony. Guests fled, one magnate clutching his throat, choking on a feather that materialized from nowhere. Horace, indignant, hired exorcists, Anglican priests with aspergillum and holy water that sizzled on stone like acid. They chanted through nights, bells tolling fury, but the shade mocked objects levitating, Bibles opening to Leviticus on blood debts. Henry, skeptical, joined the rites, but awoke with quill marks on his arms, spelling "Join us." Hugh, bolder, snuck to the fell under full moon, armed with lantern and resolve. He dug at the dynamited scars, unearthing a slab, the ritual stone, runes glowing faintly. Touching it, he felt a pull, like roots entwining ankles. Visions flooded the watcher's right, priestesses birthing under stars, soil as womb interrupted by Roman iron. The curse's birth, Aldrich's plough's desecration, demanding recursive tribute. Hugh shared with Henry, brothers bonding in forbidden knowledge. They researched in smuggled tomes, Grimshaw's library stocked with occult curios for show. They learned the watchers were Anko echoes, Celtic psychopomps, reapers of souls bound by the manor's foundations. To break the curse, a Ravenshire must return, not die, but offer willingly, blood mingling with the first sin soil. But no Ravenshire remained. The line ended with Thaddeus's exile. The brothers vowed secrecy, but the manor heard. That equinox Henry vanished first, from his bed. Sheets undisturbed, a feather on the pillow. Hugh searched, lantern trembling, finding bootprints to the fell. Digging alone, he uncovered Henry's hand, pale, reaching up, fingers curled around a quill. Clara, hysterical, demanded flight. Horace, pride-wounded, refused. This is our house now. But the railway spur derailed that winter, cars plunging into the beck, mangling workers whose screams mimicked raven cries. Blame fell on sabotage. Horace's fortune evaporated in lawsuits. Clara poisoned herself with arsenic from the garden shed. Her note, "The walls whisper your names." Hugh, sole survivor, inherited a pyre. He burned the manor in 1855, flames devouring oaken memory, the feather consumed last, shrieking as it blackened. But stone endures fire. The shell stood, bought by eccentric Lord Archibald Voss in 1860, a collector of curses drawn by newspaper sensationalism. Childless, he restored the manor as a museum of the macabre wings for waxworks of vanished twins, galleries of Barrow artifacts. Visitors paid shillings to tour, gasping at the nursery's etchings, the chapel's stains. Voss lectured on folklore, his voice booming. The Ravenshire curse is archetype, hubris versus the chthonic. But nights alone, he felt the pull, dreams of ploughs tilling his chest, soil filling lungs. Voss adopted an heir, young Tobias Blackwood, an orphan of sharp wit and shadowed eyes. Tobias grew amid relics, absorbing lore like osmosis. By 1880, Voss dead of apoplexy, lips blue, feathers in throat. Tobias claimed Ravenshire at 25. He married Eliza Hawthorne, a spiritualist of pale beauty, seances her parlor trick. Their union bore twins Ravenna and Roderick, born 1882, under a comet's tail. Tobias, versed in the curse, warded rigorously, iron horseshoes on every door, salt lines at windows, the feather buried under concrete in the cellar. Yet the equinoxes passed uneasily. Ravenna spoke to shadows, claiming playmates with feather hair. Roderick collected bones from the moors, arranging them in barrow patterns on the lawn. Eliza's seances summon not spirits, but echoes, Eloan's voice overlapping lost twins, demanding the return. Tobias, desperate, excavated the cellar, unearthing the feather, pristine mocking. He consulted mediums from London who fled after one sitting, babbling of roots in the blood. The climax brewed in 1899, fin de seco decadence clashing with ancient dread. Tobias hosted a grand ball, masks and mantillas swirling in gaslight to celebrate the century's turn. Guests, occultists, aristocrats, danced to waltzes laced with absinthe's green fire. Ravenna and Roderick, 17, glided like apparitions, their beauty unearthly. As midnight neared, the chimes told 13, and the air shifted. Masks slipped, revealing faces not their own. Eloan's smile on Ravenna, Jasper's grin on Roderick. The floor undulated, cracks blooming like veins, soil seeping up in tendrils. Panic reigned. Tobias seized the feather, confronting the shade amid chaos. Eloan coalesced, a whirlwind of faces, the line renews. The debt eternal. Tobias offered himself, dagger to wrist, but Ravenna intervened, her hand on his, guiding the blade away. "Not you, father. Us." The twins, entwined, walked to the hall's heart, where floorboards splintered, revealing the barrow's vein. A glowing fissure. They descended hand in hand, laughter echoing as earth swallowed them. Guests witnessed, sworn to silence by Tobias's gold, but rumors festered. Tobias lived out his days a hermit, Eliza mad in the attic, raving of feather children. He died in 1914 as war's drums beat, willing the manor to the nation as a monument to folly. But war came, shells scarring the moors, the manor requisitioned for officers. Soldiers heard chimes at 13, saw twins in trenches. Ravenna bandaging wounds with silk that turned to feathers, Roderick leading charges into no man's land mirages. Post-armistice, the estate decayed, looted by locals who pried stones for curses to sell. By 1930, it fell to distant Queen Amelia Ravenshire, a spinster librarian from Oxford inheriting via Tobias's solicitor. Childless, she documented the legacy, filling vaults with journals, artifacts. But solitude bred visions. The feather resurfaced in a wall cavity, whispering her name. No twins, but the curse adapted, dreams of herself as twin, split soul seeking reunion. She resisted burning pages, but the barrows called. On her last equinox, 1940, amid blitz sirens, she walked the fell, vanishing into fog. Searchers found her spectacles, cracked beside a burrow rimmed with fresh feathers. World War II ravaged the manor, bombs cratering the grounds, officers' ghosts lingering in halls. Post-war, it became a sanitarium for shell-shocked, patients raving of barrow tunnels, twin shadows at bed's foot. Closed in 1955, it stood empty, weeds reclaiming walls, ravens nesting in empty eyes of windows. Squatters came and went, their tales of vanishings dismissed as vagrant folly. The 20th century's end brought Elias Ravenshire, a professor of anthropology, great-nephew to Amelia. He arrived in 1990 with wife Clara and daughters, twins of Corsi Leela and Luna, aged 5. Elias, academic armor gleaming, viewed the curse as cultural construct, a psychogeographic echo of land enclosure traumas. He restored the manor for research, installing labs, cameras to capture anomalies. Clara, skeptical, focused on hearth baking bread that rose too high, crusts cracking like thunder. The girls played in the nursery, giggling at etchings, claiming, "The bird boys want to play tag." Elias's studies yielded papers, the Ravenshire phenomenon, folklore as familial neurosis. But nights, the chimes told, cameras fogging with breath not their own. Leela drew feathers in blood from pricked fingers, Luna hummed brythonic dirges, learned nowhere. The equinox of 1995 loomed, Elias warded with science, EMF meters beeping at thresholds, salt replaced by silica packets. But the fissure reappeared in the hall, soil exhaling Eloan's perfume, earth and milk. The night came storm-lashed. Elias awoke to silence, Clara beside him, cold. The girls' room empty, beds made, toys arranged in barrow circles. He searched the fell, flashlight beams slicing mist, finding tiny footprints to the crater. Digging frenzied, he unearthed a locket, his daughter's chains linked, containing locks of hair woven with raven plumes. Clara's scream from the manor, she found the feather on their pillow pulsing. Elias confronted the shade, recorder running. "Why us? The line is diluted." Eloin face a palimpsest of all lost, replied, blood remembers. The ploughs echo in your veins. Elias survived, mad with grief, institutionalizing in 2000. The manor boarded up a scar on the moors. In 2020, the last claimant, a blogger named Theo Ravenshire descendant via bastard branch, arrived for content, cursed estate haunt tour. No family, just cameras and bravado. He mocked the law, sleeping in the nursery, live streaming chimes at 13. Viewers spiked as shadows moved, whispers glitched the feed. Equinox night, stream cut. Theo vanishing mid-sentence, phone found in the fissure, final words. They're here, twins calling my name. Ravenshire stands now, empty but alive, waiting. The curse patient for the next blood drop. To grasp the Ravenshire curse's tendrils, we must dig deeper than barrow soil, into the strata of history, where fact and folklore entwine like lovers in the dark. The Yorkshire moors, that vast undulating sea of heather and hollows, are no idle backdrop. They are a palimpsest, layers of human striving etched into peat that preserves bones and grudges alike. Our tale roots in the Neolithic, some 5,000 years past, when the first peoples raised barrows not as tombs, but as wombs, earth, mounds for the reborn aligned to solstices where the sun's blade pierced winter's heart. These were the ancestors of the Brigantes, Celtic tribes who saw the land as animate alive with anima loci, spirits bound to hill and hollow, demanding reverence in blood and bloom. Archaeology bears witness. Excavations at sites like the Devil's Apronful, mere miles from our fictional Ravenshire, reveal chambered tombs crammed with red deer antlers, pollen from mead's sweet feasts, and quernstones for grinding grain mingled with bone. Ritual, not refuse. The Brigantes priestesses, Banfeed, officiated birthing rites in these mounds, believing soil as fertile as flesh. Twins prized as bridges to the other world, their dual souls potent offerings to ensure the clan's vigor. Disrupt this catastrophe. Roman legions learned harshly in AD 71, when Queen Cartamandua's betrayal sparked uprisings, moors running red as barrows vomited, warriors from hidden lairs. Tacitus chronicled the terror earth swallowing cohorts whole, shades rising with mist. Echoes of our watchers. Christianity's tide, crashing in the 7th century with Augustine's missionaries, recast these as devil's dens. Barrows became hell mounds, their rites branded pagan sorcery. Saxon kings plowed edges for fields, but the old ways lingered, whispers in Beowulf like lays of word, fate as woven thread unspooling for hubris. By the Norman conquest of 1066, the Moors were feudal fiefs, yeomen like our Aldrich tilling under Lord's lash. Enclosure acts of the 16th century accelerated desecration, common lands fenced, barrows bulldozed for sheep runs, displacing folk whose law wove curses into hedgerows. Small wonder tales of black dogs, raven-eyed hounds harbingers of doom, proliferated as in the Barghest legends of Yorkshire, spectral guardians avenging stolen earth. The Ravenshires emerge in this churn. Parish rolls from 1427 list Aldrich's, tenant of Ravensfell, a tract deeded post-plague when labour scarcity let survivors claim wilds. His prosperity, not sorcery alone but savvy selective breeding of hardy Herdwick sheep, dies from moorworts yielding raven black wool prized in Flemish markets. But folklore clings. The Yorkshire Post of 1645, post our Eleanor's poisoning, notes, strange aviary at Ravenshire, birds behaving as familiars. Civil War context amplifies. Parliamentarian purges hunted, papist plotters, Edmund's hidden priest fitting the mould. Witch hunts peaked 1645-47 under Matthew Hopkins, Witchfinder General, executing 300 across England, many in Yorkshire for barrow communings. Eleanor's ghost, perhaps a smear, her ambition recast as Maleficium, deeper Celtic undercurrents pulse. The Anko, Breton psychopomp borrowed by Felts, reaps souls with scythe or club, often as raven-headed ferryman. In Yorkshire variants, it's the Padfoot, black dog with raven cry, circling barrows thrice before claiming kin, twins motif. Ubiquitous in lore, Romulus Remus, suckled by wolf, Irish said twins as changelings, stealing mortal pairs. Eloin's vanishing evokes the Benandanti, Italian night, warriors battling witches for fertility. But inverted, watchers as defenders, ploughers as thieves. Folklore collector William Henderson's Notes on the Folk, Lore of the Northern Counties, 1879, catalogues more tales of earth, hungry spirits, demanding twin teeth for disturbed graves. Direct parallel to our debt compounding. Industrial scars deepen the eeriness. 18th, 19th century enclosures displaced 1,000 more families, fueling Luddite riots. Textile workers smashing machines as Thaddeus's mill evokes. Charles Kinsley's The Water Babies o 1863, set in Yorkshire streams, moralizes child labour's horrors, but whispers curses on polluters' chimneys birthing imps, rivers running with black blood. Ravenshire's poisoned beck. Historical 1830s mills dump dyes into Calder, fish floating belly up. Workers' lungs feathered with cotton dust. Weaver's cough, black as raven plume. Equinox rites tie to pagan wheels, Samain veils thinning. Equinoxes as balance points where chthonic forces surge. Real equinox festivals persisted covertly. Yorkshire's horseman's word, secret society invoking old gods for horse, taming with barrow oaths. 20th century war layers trauma. WWI trenches mirrored barrows, mud-choked hells where hatted twins, brother pairs fell together, ghosts haunting moors as in birdsong by Fawkes. W. Blitz buried Amelia amid sirens, Ravenshire's sanitarium echoing Bedlam's lore, asylums built on plague pits, patients hearing earth voices. Anthropological lens Elias's psychogeography nods to W.G. Sebald's The Rings of Saturn, tracing East Anglian ruins to imperial decay, but moors add Celtic melancholy, due in sorrow for lost lands. Folklore's authenticity unsettles because it's lived. Modern sightings persist. 2015 Yorkshire Evening Post reports raven flock anomaly over old barrow sites, birds forming human shapes. Ufologists link to fairy rings, but folklorists commemorate personal legends reviving old fears. The curses blood remembers. Genetic memory echoes epigenetics. Trauma imprinting DNA as studies on Holocaust survivors show stress markers past generations. Ravenshire, then, is microcosms. One family's fall mirroring collective wounds. Colonial plunders, industrial rapine, war's reapings, educational yet eerie. These aren't dusty facts, but warnings etched in peat. Visit the moors today, feel the wind's memory, hear the hither hush names. Barrows stand, watchful soil stirring underfoot. Tread lightly, the watchers wait. Now, shadows lengthening, we turn inward, from Manor's stones to the psyche's crypts. The Ravenshire legacy transcends Gothic romp, it's a scalpel to the soul, dissecting universal terror's fates, inexorability, sin's inheritance, the family's devouring maw. At core, the curse embodies word, Old English for fate as web, spun by Norns blind to please. Aldrich's plough, not mere act but archetype. Humanity's hubris tilling chaos for order, awakening chthonic reprisal. Psychoanalytically, Freud's uncanny, Himmlich turning unhamlich, manifests in the manor home as tomb, familiar feather as alien quill. Eloan's shade, the return of the repressed, ancestral guilt bubbling like barrow gas, demanding integration or destruction. Symbolically, twins loom titanic, Jungian duality self-split, animanimus in eternal dance, but cursed, shadow twins devouring light siblings, each vanishing, individuation aborted, ego fracturing into multiplicity, the debt compounding, exponential trauma, generational transmission as in Bowlby's attachment theory, early loss imprinting voids, past as insecure bonds, ravens as psychopomps, totems of transformation, death's black bird, but here, metamorphosis stalled, souls trapped in liminal earth, echoing Orphic mysteries where descent births wisdom or madness. Universal fears crystallize at telephobia, fear of imperfection. In the flawless repayment, one sin, infinite echoes. Cultural trauma threads through England's enclosure as original sin, displacing folk for capital, birthing Luddite ghosts. In post-colonial lens, the Moor's colonized body, ploughed, extracted, rebelling with spectral insurgency. Human nature's dark bloodlines as prisons, love as lure to abyss. Eleanor's ambition, Pandora's curiosity, spilling woes, Percival's denial, Faustian bargain with progress, mill grinding not wool, but souls, ominous intellect. Consider Camus absurd, Sisyphus pushing boulder of fate, Ravenshire's tilling cursed soil anew each generation. Or Nietzsche's eternal return. Would you relive the curse, affirming life? The manor's persistence, resilience's horror, ruins rebirth as monuments to futility. Psychologically, the call of the void, Le Pont de la Peur, pulls hairs to fissure, equinox as existential hinge. Thematic nexus family as fates forge, secrets smithing chains, whispers, superego's murmur, judging inherited flaws, yet hope flickers, dim as chapel candle, breaking via return, willing sacrifice as Kierkegaardian leap, faith over reason, Elias's science fails, only embrace dissolves, connects to now, climate guilts, ancestral pollutions haunting descendants, demanding restorative justice. The curse warns ignore Earth's memory, and it reclaims in feathers and fog. Linger here in this intellectual gloam, does your blood whisper? Listen, the barrows call. And so, the veil descends once more on Ravenshire's lament. From Aldrich's defiant plough to Theo's silenced stream, the bloodline weaves its noose, tightening not with malice, but inexorable rhythm equinox to equinox, twin to twin. We have walked halls where portraits plead, gardens where thorns drink tears, barrows where earth hungers eternal. The curse endures, not as fictions flourish, but mirror to our marrow. What sins do we till in daily soils, hoping roots forget? Picture it now, as thunder fades, the manor sentinel windows, blind eyes staring seaward, ravens perched as judges. No savior comes, the line, diluted to droplets, waits for reunion. Perhaps in you, listener, a forgotten vein pulses, whispering return. Sleep uneasy tonight. Feel the floorboards shift, hear the 13 toll. For in throne of nightmares, endings are illusions. Curses circle, patient as Moore's mist. Until next shadow, fare thee well in the dark.